my friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing another attempting to finish every series I am in the middle of vlog. Now, if you did not see it, last month I did a video where I went over every single series I am in the middle of, and it came out to about like 90 odd series. Now, in all fairness, about half of those were series that are not started. I consider them kind of part of the problem because I physically own a copy of a book in a series, which kind of means that I've committed to at least starting the series by owning it. So even if you discard that part of the problem, I still have like 40 to 50 series I am in the middle of, some of which I can't do anything about right now because I am just caught up and, I have to wait until the author puts out yet another book. But in the meantime, we are going to try and make progress on the in progress category. So I will pop up the current numbers right up here just because the video is now a month out of date and those numbers won't be exactly accurate. I'm sure that they're not far off, but just in case, I'm going to throw the latest stats up. But in this video, I'm going to be attempting to read 3 books. Now, I am on a bit of a time crunch, so we shall see if I succeed. But I wanted to pick 3 for 2 reasons. I will go over them in just a second. But this is our tentative TBR for this video. As you can see, we're counting the Kindle as a part of the pile. But really quickly, the first book we are going to be reading is A Sky in the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. This is the 4th and final book in the Ember Quartet, the first book being An Ember in the Ashes. And I am so excited to find out how this series ends because, man, our main characters just keep getting walloped by life, and I would like them to have a happy ending. It's kind of one of those series where you're like, oh man, they really cannot catch a break. So I am hopeful that this will end on a more positive note than the first 3 books. But I am so very bummed to be saying goodbye to this world, at least for a little bit. I understand that Air, her new book, is set in this world just a couple decades later. So I will definitely be picking up that book. But I want to finish this one first. And I am, like I said, happy but sad that I am picking up this book. And then this book is kind of the reason that I have a 3rd book kind of pending for this video. This is Her Radiant Curse by Elizabeth Lim. This is the prequel to the Six Crimson Cranes duology. So I kind of count that as part of the series and therefore say that I need to finish this book in order to finish the series. But you can also argue that it is not. This book follows our female main character's stepmother from the original duology, kind of her backstory, especially because her stepmother is such a pivotal character in the duology. So I am counting it. It counts for me, but I don't know if it technically counts for finishing a series. So I am just going to cover my bases and pick up a 3rd book in this video. Now I am kind of back and forth on this. I have Wild Eyes by Miss Elsie Silver, which is the next book I need in the Rose Hill series. If I had read it like a month or 2 ago, I would have been caught up. But, she has since released the 3rd book, or I could read the next book in the Gold Rush Ranch series, which is a photo finish. So just because Her Radiant Curse kind of sort of counts, and then I will not get caught up regardless of which Elsie Silver book I read, we are just going to be reading 3 books in this video. So I will see you guys shortly with a halfway check-in. My friends, I am excited to say that I am halfway through the first book for this video. As I'm sure you saw, I ended up picking up a photo finish by Miss Elsie Silver instead of Wild Eyes. I am happy to report that I am enjoying this book much more than I enjoyed the first book in the series, which was Off to the Races. I will say one of my biggest complaints about the first book was, while I very, very, very much enjoyed Billy, I did not particularly care for Vaughn. There was nothing like wrong with him, but he didn't like stick out or was unique. He was kind of a very stereotypical grumpy male main character with lots of money. So I kind of felt like he had a stock personality. I will say that in this book, I am very much enjoying his presence as a side character. So maybe I just wasn't in the right frame of mind when I read Off to the Races, or maybe in the second book, Elsie Silver's writing has, grown a little bit, and therefore I am enjoying him more. Now, this book follows Violet Eaton and Cole Harding. Violet Eaton is the jockey who rode Dee Dee to the Northern Crown or something like that in the first book. And she is also the sister to the Eaton brothers, who feature very, very heavily in the Chestnut Springs series. So I was very, very excited to find out that she had a book in the first series that Elsie Silver wrote. So I was looking forward to her book, and it has not disappointed so far. And then Cole Harding is Vaughn's brother, older brother. So I'm gonna put this down. I don't know why I'm still holding it. But the two of them met online and kind of became pen pals. They met on like more of a sexual form, but ended up forming a more emotional bond until one day they kind of crossed the line, and Cole reacts really poorly to the emotional intimacy, and Violet ends up ghosting him. At the halfway point, we are still not getting like all the pieces of what happened between the two of them. So there's still, I'm sure, more that will end up uncovered. But he recognizes her when she wins her like last race in the last book, and kind of lets her know that he knows who she is. And she kind of freaks the hell out because in essence, he's her boss's boss. And then this book takes place like a year later, and they've kind of not really talked to each other since he kind of dropped that bomb on her and walked away. And Violet ends up having to stay in the same house as him, and he handles it very poorly. She handles it with more grace, but not like a ton more grace. So we're kind of getting forced proximity. We just kind of got the sort of one bed trope, like just now. He is a veteran and is having, flashbacks and nightmares, and she ends up hopping in bed to comfort him briefly. And of course, she is gone by the time he wakes up. But I will say that I don't know if you guys know from the first book, but there was a jockey named Patrick who kind of abused the racehorse that Violet won her races on. And he is unfortunately making a reappearance in these books. I say unfortunately because he is a slimy git and has wandering hands and is very inappropriate to Violet. I will say I feel like it is a bit of a plot device to kind of push Violet and Cole closer together, because obviously that kind of instigates some feelings of jealousy. But I think our main hang up in this book really is Cole. Like, Violet has her own issues. She doesn't like to be coddled. A big part of that is because her brothers and her dad kind of broke out the kid gloves with her, and she feels very suffocated by that. But Cole has like a lot of baggage. He is, like I said, a veteran, so there's the PTSD to contend with. He has a failed engagement with a woman who is very like cold and corporate, and was kind of a right choice for the family business, not necessarily the right choice for Cole. But she has reared her, I don't want to say ugly head, because, I'm sure she's not ugly and she's not described as ugly, but personality wise, ugly. She has resurfaced, and on top of that, because of the whole fallout, he feels that he cannot or should not emotionally connect to people, which is why he dropped Violet like hot potatoes the first time and now is kind of going hot and cold with her. He's also kind of dealing with the fallout, like the emotional fallout of his father's death. So Vaughn doesn't really remember their father's death, which is why he was more so, I think, attached to his grandfather in the first book. Like, that was his father figure because his father died when he was so young. But Cole very much remembers their dad, very much had a bond with their dad. And their dad was a jockey who died during a race. And so he watched it happen. He was there. And I think that that's another thing that he and Violet are going to have to contend with in order to have their happily ever after, because she is a jockey and therefore her profession is kind of at loggerheads with his personal issues. So I am very excited to be reading this book. I have kind of had a rough reading week leading up to this. As I mentioned before, I was doing a reading outside of your comfort zone for a week vlog. So I really, really wanted a fluffy romance to kind of pivot on. So this is definitely fulfilling that brief, and thank goodness. So I think that this book will definitely have me in a good place for our next two books, but I will check in with you guys when I am done reading this book. I think that I will finish it tonight, but I don't think that we will get any further with our other books tonight. So I will check in with you, and I think I have 2 hours left. Let's see. Me and this Kindle are still learning to make friends. So I think, yes, I have 2 hours and 3 minutes left in this book. So I will finish this tonight and I will let you know my thoughts and feelings. But so far, so good. All right, my friends, we are officially on day 2 of this video. I have finished a photo finish by Miss Elsie Silver. This is officially book 1 of this video complete. But I did not check in with you guys last night as I had originally planned, because by the time I was done, I was so tired I could not form a coherent thought. And as much as I enjoy yapping, I do try and have a point. So we waited until today for this update. So that is going to be a 4-star book for me, which is great because Off to the Races, which is the first book in the series, was either a 3 or a 3.5 star read for me. And so I was kind of worried that I might not like the rest of the Gold Rush Ranch series as much as I enjoyed Chestnut Springs. I think I've said it before, but I thoroughly enjoyed Chestnut Springs with the exception of the last book, or Beau's book. Sorry, Beau. But that was just kind of not my cup of tea. But everything else I have thoroughly enjoyed. So when I picked up Off to the Races and it did not go as well as I hoped, it kind of gave me a healthy dose of skepticism for the rest of the series. So I'm happy to say that the second book has disabused me of that notion. But as I kind of mentioned in the halfway check-in, and this is kind of the biggest reason this book is 4 stars instead of anything higher, is I did not love the way that Violet conducted herself through the third act conflict. So as I kind of mentioned before, Cole has a lot of baggage. Life has done him dirty. And they, kind of more than once kind of come to a head about certain issues because of his trauma. And the final issue that they come to a head about, which I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to spoil this for anybody who hasn't read it. But she basically gives him an ultimatum and a deadline. And she kind of just tells him that he needs to get over himself. There was no kind of, I don't necessarily disagree with how she handled it. I just don't love the way she approached it. It was so very I don't give a crap how you feel, which I don't think that's necessarily true. I just think that that is the way that she came across, and that's the way that she came across to him, and it was just, she in the moment was like, she was so in the moment that she didn't realize why he was reacting the way he was reacting. She kind of lashed out at him to the point where everybody around them was a little bit like, whoa, a little much. And then she proceeded to handle it by telling him that he needed to basically get the F over himself. And while I don't disagree with her point, because like I said, you know, he has trauma that he's essentially chosen not to unpack. And this interaction is kind of the result of that. But at the same time, she could have handled it with more grace. Granted, it's like a very human reaction that Elsie wrote for her, but I just did not love the way she conducted herself at that point. So the rest of it, though, I loved. I absolutely did not see the twist coming at like the 60% mark. And I wish that we had gotten the scene where he comes clean to Vaughn about that secret. But of course, we got, they sat on the front porch and had beers and talked about it, not like any detail, but 'tis what it is. So I very much enjoyed this book. So if you're into small town romance, cowboy romance, there's an age gap between them. He's a veteran. You know, if any of that sounds appealing to you, I would definitely pick up this book. But that leads us to the second book I'm reading in this video, which I am actually a very decent chunk of the way through, and that is Her Radiant Curse by Elizabeth Lim. Now, as I said in the intro, this is the prequel to the Six Crimson Cranes duology, which is a YA duology that came out like several years ago and received, I think, a pretty decent reception. But I am kind of counting this as part of the series, and therefore I am picking it up in this video. But this follows kind of the history of the stepmother from the Six Crimson Cranes duology, like the stepmother that curses the female main character in that, and her brothers and all that. And in that book, we kind of get more backstory on her stepmother and why her stepmother made the choices that she made. But this is actually like the full-on backstory about her stepmother and her stepmother's sister. So the premise of this book follows Chani and Vanna. So Chani is the older sister, Vanna is the younger sister. When Vanna was being born, her mother very much suffered through the labor, and in order to try and save his wife, the girl's father leaves Chani in the forest to try and broker a deal to save his wife's life, basically giving up his oldest child in exchange for his wife. And which is very, what a bad parent. I mean, he continues to be an absolutely awful and insufferable character through this book, but, she says that, at one point he was a decent person. I doubt it. I doubt it. You leave your kid in the woods to die at the hands of a demon witch? Seriously? But the King of the Serpents ends up protecting Chani by biting her and making her blood poisonous, which essentially renders her useless to the demon witch, who is already pissed off because she was promised Vanna instead of Chani. And the witch decides to retaliate by cursing Chani's face to then look like a snake. That way her blood matches her face. And then Chani is ostracized in her village and in her community. And her father goes around making her wear a wooden mask. And it's rather horrendous. So the start of this book kind of comes into where the youngest daughter, Vanna, is going to be 18 and going to be coming of age. And she seems to have a extraordinary aura to her. And as we come to find out, there is something that makes her special. And it also makes her highly, highly prized. So when she turns 18, all of these kings and emperors and princes come to basically bid on her. So Chani's father, in addition to leaving her out to die, then tries to sell his youngest daughter to the highest bidder. So, parent of the year in this book, parent of the year. And Chani is very much trying to dissuade Vanna from doing this, but Vanna wants to get Chani out from their community, and so she decides to proceed in the hopes that her future husband is benevolent and will let her take Chani with her when they leave, and she can, Chani then can live a maybe semi-normal, somewhat accepted life. So I am like very much enjoying being back in this world. There are moments where I find Chani like very frustrating. She's very impulsive. And she has a snake friend, because, she, obviously the king of the serpents right before he died, like basically bequeathed her with the gift of his power, turning her blood to poison. So she kind of has a special affinity for snakes, and she has a particular snake friend who I think is actually a descendant of that king that saved Chani from the witch. And he's like the voice of reason, and Chani just ignores him like on a regular basis. And I'm like, he's almost always right. Why wouldn't you just, start paying attention to what he's saying? So she can be very impulsive. She can be very stubborn. But she has I personally think, a very beautiful love for her sister. And I'm very much rooting for this all to have a happy ending. I am kind of interested to see if Elizabeth Lim will be able to, or chooses to, weave a happy ending for these characters, considering what we are told in the duology about how this whole thing ends. But there are already discrepancies between what we were told in those books and what happened here. So maybe, the stepmother decides to tell a, slightly altered version of the story. So I'm kind of hoping that this does not end in heartbreak, but we shall see. So I am going to go ahead and finish up this book, and then we will be picking up Sky Beyond the Storm. I think it's A Sky Beyond the Storm. But then we will be picking up the last book in An Ember in the Ashes, and then we will be done with this video. So I will check in with you guys when I have something to say about the end of this book, and then we will get started on our third and final book for this video. I have officially finished the second book for this video, which is Her Radiant Curse, and I think I'm still undecided about what I'm going to rate it. Probably 3.5 to 4 stars, somewhere in there. But if you have read the Six Crimson Cranes duology, you kind of have an idea of how this book will end. And I was hoping that my expectations would end up being subverted in some manner. And to be honest, I don't really think that they were. Granted, we don't know how we get to the end of our journey, but I was kind of hoping that the ending might not be all that it seems, as I mentioned in my halfway check-in. And that, for the most part, was not the case. So the ending is very bittersweet. I think that Chani definitely experienced some growth, learned to be a little bit less brash in her actions. And I think that Vanna is just a sweetheart. She initially kind of annoyed me because I felt like she was not listening to what Chani was trying to tell her and the things that Chani was trying to warn her about. And it was kind of frustrating because it's she's your sister. She's always had your best interests at heart. Why wouldn't you give her the time of day when she's trying to warn you about these kinds of things? But at the end of the day, I think that she loved Chani so very much. The love between the sisters, I think, is very, very pure and very, very sweet. So that leads us to our third book for this video, which is A Sky Beyond the Storm. So happy to report I did in fact get the title correct when I was bumbling about in my last clip. But the goal is to finish this bad boy tonight, which that's a lofty goal because it's 500 pages and it's 8 p.m. But I'm going to do my best, and we shall see how far I make it if I do not finish it, which I'm not wishing that on myself. I'm just trying to temper my expectations. So I will get started on this, and I will check in with you about halfway through. Really quickly, if you're unfamiliar with this series, this is the fourth and final book in An Ember in the Ashes series. The Ember Quartet, I think is what it's called. And in that series, or in this series, the FMC Laya is part of like the scholar order in the world. Her people are very oppressed, treated like slaves. And then we have Elias, who belongs to the Martial Academy, where masks are trained, which are like elite soldiers. And at the start of the series, Laya's brother is arrested and her grandparents are killed during the arrest. And he is accused of assisting the rebellion against the Martial Empire. And Laya doesn't know how much credence to give those accusations. And she also just ends up running from the whole situation. And when she does, she stumbles across the actual rebels, the rebellion, and they basically strike a deal with her. If she is willing to spy on the academy where Elias goes to school, and more specifically on the commandant or the head of the academy, which is Elias's mother, they will help her in retrieving her brother. So we have obviously traveled very far from that plot line at this point. I am so hoping that some good things finally start happening for our characters, because this is the kind of series where it's just one bad thing after another, after another, after another. And you're like, how much can life crap on two people? I am hopeful that we will reach a somewhat positive resolution at the end of this book, but I have a feeling that this series will, in fact, break my heart. So, like I said, I'll check in with you when I finally have something to say about this book. Besides, I'm excited to read it. Well, I talked a big game last night about finishing A Sky Beyond the Storm, and well, let's just say I'm halfway, and so let's do a check-in. But before I do the check-in, I have a very, very exciting unboxing to share with you guys. I got a Fairy Loot Special Edition in the mail. So this is actually like my first special edition that was like a pre-order, or like outside of the subscription box. And I am very, very excited about it. So much so that I have changed into my Studio Ghibli sweatshirt in honor of this book. So that gives you a hint on what it is. Fairy Loot always makes such pretty boxes, but their packaging, while it is intended to protect the book, is not exactly the cutest. But we come with a little thank you card, and oh my goodness! Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to put this box on the floor in the hopes that Bean will take interest in it. But it's so much smaller than I thought it would be. Not that I'm upset. I'm a happy camper either way. But I'm gonna put this because I have a feeling that the cats will get into this and they will make a racket. I'm just gonna close this up for now. But I got the special edition of Kiki's Delivery Service. Oh, I'm so excited. So this is like very much kind of in keeping with like scenes from the movie, although the art style is ever so slightly different, and it does come with foiling on the front and back covers, kind of edging the clouds. And the back says, if you need something delivered, I can do it easy peasy. And then, of course, we have the sprayed edges, which are gorgeous. And then this is the part I'm always really excited about, is the naked hardcover. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh. Look at this. Look at how gorgeous this is. And it's kind of like a linen texture almost. but I now own a very, very beautiful copy of Kiki's Delivery Service. The end papers really aren't anything particularly special, but they're still pretty nonetheless. And I'm just super excited. Oh, it comes with illustrations on the inside. I didn't realize that. Oh, this is so cool. I will say the font is huge, but it is a kid's book, so look at that. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Back to the subject matter of this video. I'm going to stick this in here real quick. Back to the subject matter of this video. I am halfway through A Sky Beyond the Storm, and I have already almost cried. There is a very tragic death of a side character around the 170 to 175 page mark. And I was almost in tears. So this does not bode well, because I have a feeling that will not be the last death in this book by far. I mean, obviously, there's lots of other deaths in this book, because that is just the nature of a book with war. But that is the first, character to die in this particular book. And I didn't expect this particular person's death to upset me as much as it did. But it really did get to me. So beyond that, I am super, I don't want to say I'm super excited about Elias's storyline, because Lord knows that will come back and bite me in the butt. But I feel like we are starting to see a spark of the old Elias, which is huge if you know anything about there's cat fluff. If you know anything about what's happening in this series, at least at this point in the series, then you understand what I'm saying when I'm so happy to see part of, Elias's personality return, or at least, a small fraction of it. I'll take whatever I can get. But I am super happy to say we are starting to get more backstory. So in this world, we kind of come to find out that there's kind of an ancient struggle happening, which of course there is. But the main antagonist in this book, this series, is called the Nightbringer. And once upon a time, he was the king of the Jinn, and the Scholar people, which is Laya's people, in a pursuit of power, end up enslaving / killing the Jinn, the Jinn race as an entire entity. And now the Nightbringer is seeking revenge for the loss of his family and the loss of his people and the enslavement of his people, because those who were enslaved were then leached off of, their power and their magic was taken and repurposed. So Laya is starting to get more and more and more of a backstory on what happened all those hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And we're starting to realize that the Nightbringer is not the only old and ancient entity who is influencing current day events. And I am just, this series is so complex and so politically driven. I am surprised to say that I am loving Helene's arc. So she is the Bloodshrike. She was Elias's childhood friend. She is kind of, at least in the first couple books, a pain in the batuckus. She disdains Laya, is jealous of Laya, is fairly bloodthirsty, and her house's motto is loyalty until the end. And in some cases, she takes that too far. I think that she, at least in the first book or so, takes every order very literally, doesn't really use any critical thinking skills, which she is more than capable of. And we're starting to finally see her. She's also a character who very much pushes down her feelings and doesn't acknowledge them, doesn't want to engage on that level, is not willing to just have any emotions to speak of. And if she does, she shoves them down, which is very funny, because her little sister at some point tells her, the longer you shove it all down, the harder it's going to come back swinging. So I'm sure we will get that at some point. But at least for now, I am enjoying her story arc, which, like I said, I never thought I would say, but she's kind of growing as a person, growing as a character, coming in to realize that she cannot always walk away from anything that makes her uncomfortable, is, really following through on loyalty to her family, which I am loving. Obviously, she's still loyal to the Empire, but she is finally, spreading some of that loyalty around. So I am, like I said, interested to see where Elias' plotting goes, excited to see where Elias's personality transplant will end up, and very much enjoying Helene's arc. I will say the Nightbringer as a antagonist is somewhat like relatable. Like, yes, you hate him and he wreaks lots and lots of havoc and causes untold amounts of pain and death, but he is also like very understandable. Like his issues with humanity in general are very justified, although the way he's, approaching it is kind of very much an eye for an eye makes the world go blind. I will say, though, that Cirrus Venturia, she is on my last damn nerve. I have never been able to stand her, and she is just horrible from the get-go and is still horrible in this book. And I am hoping to see the end of her story arc in this book. If she survives this book and other people do not, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be pissed. I also have my fingers crossed on who will end up ending her. And so we will see if the jury is out on my guess. I'm not going to say who I think is going to end her, because then I can't say if my guess was right or not without spoiling the book. So actually, I can't even tell you that, because if she dies, that's kind of a spoiler anyway. Well, dang. Anyway, I will check in with you guys when I am done with this book. I do plan on probably actually filming me reading the last, maybe 50 or so pages. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to cry on camera. I have a feeling this book is going to make me cry. And I don't really want to. I'm a very ugly crier. Like, I get all red and splotchy, and, nobody wants to see that. So we shall see. But I will catch you when I'm done with this book. So I ended up needing a minute before I talked to you guys about this book, as I am sure you saw, and as I predicted, it did break my heart a little bit. I did almost cry. It was a very near miss. I count crying as, a tear track down the cheek, and they did not escape, therefore I did not cry. But the deaths in this book are heartbreaking. I know that I commented about one that happened in the first half of the book. And of course, this is a very war-driven book, and therefore there was many, many more. But there was one in particular that was just very, very gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. And I kind of rage at it because I don't feel that it needed to happen, but then I never feel that anybody really needs to die, except for, those who do ill upon others. So I am contented with this ending. I am not mad at how it ended. I think that the people who survived very much found their callings and their place in the world. I think that it all sorted itself out in a way that made a lot of sense. Am I still heartbroken? Yes. Am I still sad? Yes. Is this a 5-star read for me? Yes, absolutely. Do I recommend this series? Yes, absolutely. This is the last book in a 4-book series, so I really don't want to touch too much on the actual plot to the book, because I don't want to ruin it for you guys. But just know that if you've been thinking about it, absolutely do, and just know that it will take an emotional toll on you, and your heart will hurt at the end. So 5 stars. And that is the last book for this video. Just to recap really quickly, I also read the second book in the Gold Rush Ranch series, which I ended up rating a 4-star. And then I also read Her Radiant Curse by Elizabeth Lim, which was the prequel to the Six Crimson Cranes duology. And I have settled on, for now, a 4-star rating for this book. I am still bouncing back and forth between the 3.5 and a 4, but I don't do quarter-star ratings, so I think I'm going to settle on a 4. But in happy news, that does mean that these 2 series are wrapped up and off my list, and I am 1 book closer to finishing the Gold Rush Ranch series. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to stick around for a while, please subscribe. Either way, I appreciate you joining me. Bye!